Hello and welcome to the trailer of our new podcast, I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. I am your host, and this is my co-host, Caleb.
Hello.
Hey, Caleb. Good to see you again after all these years. I know that most of us had some very unique 90s youth group experiences, and ours was one of the weirdest. Caleb and I thought, hey, you know what? Let's talk about that again because good to talk about those things, especially now that it's 30 years past. Well, 25 years, 30 years past. At one point in our church in good old Woodbury, Minnesota, number of kids attending that youth group outnumbered the people in the church. So we had a pretty wild time with kids driving the bus, so to speak. And these experiences definitely left a impact on who we were as kids, but also who we were as adults. So, what happened after that, and where are we at? I'm 43, Caleb's like 62, and this has changed our life or impacted our life quite a bit. So, we wanted to talk about that. We wanted to reminisce. We wanted to talk about those experiences and how they affected us, not only as kids, because we realize now that we were kids at that time, but really how did that affect us as adults? And most of all, what has changed? Caleb, did I get that basically correct?
I may not be 62, but I feel like I'm 62. That's for
You,
sure.
you look like it, honestly. Once this podcast gets video, people will see what I mean.
Yeah, the gray in the beard. I don't have that much gray. I'm getting there, though.
Mm-hmm. So I will say that something that inspired me to make this suggestion, I mean, it might have been a year ago we started talking about this, is our youth pastor would always say in youth group that he doesn't care so much where we're at now, meaning, 1998 when I'm 18 years old. He cares about where we're at in 10 years. Well, it's 25 years later, and I have a feeling that most of those people in that youth group, or some of those people in that youth group, or maybe nobody in that youth group, would identify with where my faith is at now. And a lot has happened since then. And I'm curious, you out there, if that's changed for you too, and what we can talk about that we might all be able to connect on. Because, man, youth group in the 90s was a wild thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was wild, but like you touched on a little. Like it wasn't just that it was youth group in general was wild. Like I do think the uniqueness of our experience. That's what's interesting to me is how that unique experience, which I think was really meaningful to so many of us at the time, what does that look like? What are those tentacles that kind of hooked into people? How have those
Mm-hmm.
threads thrown through? Not just where are people at, but like what have been those moments where you've actually thought back to those 90s experiences and it's either changed an opinion or it's solidified an opinion of about something that came up in youth group in the 90s when it was so black and white and
Mm-hmm.
so heavy. I don't want to say heavy-handed. That's playing my hand, but it is so such a unique experience. And so, where are those tentacles with people years later?
Absolutely. And we all came from different backgrounds. I became a Christian because of that youth group. And, some of you guys had been involved a few years before I did. And, how does, and people that we brought in became Christians there. And, maybe some of you out there, identify with that and it's just not a part of your life anymore. And maybe some of you out there identify with that. And it's most of your life right now. And so really what I thought would be interesting and obviously Caleb agrees because he doesn't like podcasts, but here he is producing one. Um, we agreed that like let's talk to our friends. Let's talk to our old friends. Through the magic of the internet, we're able to connect with them. And I'm really curious, where are they at now? I know where I'm at. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. I kind of know where Caleb's at. But where are these people at that I haven't talked to in 20 plus years? How is their faith and how is that experience at our youth group in good old Woodbury, Minnesota in the 90s changed them, affected them, and influenced them?
Yeah, I think we're both interested in reminiscing a little bit. That's not what we want to do. And so I think for me is like I don't love made the mention. I don't love podcasts, but you do, and so obviously you think there's some value to be had to not just having a conversation, getting together with somebody, but also like this being out there. And so, what do you think about that? Like that idea of like there could be things that people could also just gain from hearing about where other people are at.
I think from, the things that I read about and kind of converse with other people about online who have had similar experiences, I think sometimes some people need to know that it's okay to have things change, that you can still be a Christian even though you may think that people in your youth group assume that you're not anymore. um, that conversation is super interesting to me, right? Like, how did you grow? How did the real world change you? We were 18 years old. We had no idea about what the real world was like. And you get to the real world and man, it's hard. It's hard and I think our youth leaders had the best of intentions, but they can't prepare us for life like that. But it almost made it seem like no matter what uh, the world had to offer us, this faith in Jesus was gonna make it all okay. And I think a lot of people don't have that experience after they end up, getting a job and having kids and having a family. Like, how does that change things, and how does real life change things for you? And you know, like you said, Caleb, I think that we could talk about stories that make us laugh. How many times who played Jesus in the Carmen sketch or something like that. Most of that's probably not going to resonate with everybody because everybody's youth group experience is a little bit different. But there was such a huge evangelical pressure on kids in the 90's that I think it's healthy for people to work through and listen and say, you know what? There's other people like me out there that struggle with this or struggle with that. And I'm not talking necessarily about, oh, guys, you struggled with lust because you're 17. Well, yeah, no, no crap. I'm talking about, this type of theological implication of this social construct or just the basic ins and outs of having a family. How do those things change, and are we adapting to God, or do we feel like God's adapting to us? I mean, those are kind of big questions. I get it, but I think a lot of people feel that they may not have a space to at least ask or explore those questions, and we don't have answers here. I think it's good to have that conversation.
Yeah, and so what are some of your expectations for those conversations? Obviously, interested in talking with people who have had change of opinions, but also the flip side of it, there might be people who really feel very similarly. And then also you mentioned the idea of our youth leaders. Like, is that part of this idea too? Like, it's not just catching up with some of the kids, but maybe eventually, like, there's a lot of people that we could bring into this conversation that it might be interesting to hear from.
Yeah, I would. The hopefully upon hearing this, people who we haven't talked to for a long time are like, yeah, that would be a great place to restart a relationship again and have that conversation. I mean, in terms of our leaders, I always thought it would be a great idea that our our youth leader, God bless him, would be the finale. But we'll see who's out there and who wants to chat about it. I mean, for the conversations themselves, I would hope that people would feel free no matter where they're at to talk about where their faith is. It's not a situation where we would want to come down on somebody because we disagree with them. I think it would be a really good example of having conversations where there's not antagonism, tribalism within the conversation, even though there might be some deep things that disagree with, as long, of course, we're not harming other people, or that belief system isn't causing immediate harm to other people. But the conversation is just like, why, how has it changed and why? And how has that change linked back to those silly things that happened to us as teenagers?
Yeah, that I really like that idea of like this safe space where people can talk about it, and people can maybe even be honest about like, oh yeah, these were things that I thought I loved and I realized I didn't, or these are things that we did that I didn't. Looking back on it, I they've had this strange impact on me. So I think I like that idea of everything from a random person who was just helping out on a Wednesday night. Some adult was in the church. Again, that was a unique experience. I've talked about it before with a couple people. At one point, there were more kids at the youth group than there were adults at the church. And, the three people that I hung out with, the three other guys that I hung out with the most in that youth group was probably you, Mike, and Bill. And none of your parents went to the church. My parents went to the church, but at the time, none of your
Right.
parents went to the church. That is a really, really unique, strange experience that I think has this lasting impact. So yeah, I think that'd be an exciting part of the conversation.
Hmm. Absolutely. Totally agree.
So why a podcast, or where did you get this idea from?
I am a frequent podcast listener, like a lot of people, and it was just kind of after you and I and our other friend Ryan started, hanging out more and getting to know where we're at. Um, it really kind of occurred to me, talk to those people who were so close to us for many years in high school and through college. And in reality, I mean, any listener here could find a podcast about youth group in the 90's and, and talk about and try and revisit some of that nostalgia. And that's all well and good and fun. And we'll do a little bit of that too. But our main goal, and hopefully what might be intriguing and set us apart, is really frankly curious how all of what happened to us in the 90's flows through to where we're at now that we're, middle aged and jobs and families and all that stuff. What's the through line? What has changed and why?
Cool. I mean, I'm middle aged, but my hair is still down to my shoulders. So I'm still, even though I'm middle aged, I'm the cool type of middle aged that, is really, really awkward and really, really, just
I
really, really horrible to be around.
I'm pretty sure your mom still wants you to get a haircut.
That is true, although she has given up because now she wants my kids to get haircuts. So she's given up that fight, and instead it's, why do your kids have long hair? And I've adopted, in my family, we've adopted hair freedom. Do what you want. I don't really care. So Scott, what do you think the plan is here? We're doing this little trailer to try and get people excited, but what's your kind of hope for this and kind of the plan going forward?
The plan is just to schedule some conversations. And if you're listening and you recognize her voice or her names, or you're having some flashbacks, good or bad, at our youth group back then, be happy. It'd be great to connect with you. It doesn't have to take hours. We can just see where you're at. And it's why I want everyone to know that it's perfectly okay if you don't go to church anymore. It's perfectly okay to me if you're an atheist. I don't care. I'm just curious. So we'll schedule out some interviews of that nature, talk to people about where they're at today, try and link up with some maybe common things that a lot of us who are also other people who are listening could link back to of surviving youth group in the 90's. And then, release it, here in 2024. Hopefully by springtime we have enough content and hopefully it's well received.
Awesome. Well, hey, that's it for this trailer episode of the I Survived 90's Youth Group podcast. Thanks for listening. We hope you're excited to hear more. I know we are excited to connect with some people, and we're excited to make more of these. The music at the beginning and the end of this show is the instrumental version of Positive Change by Dread Pirate Roberts. He's an artist who used to be in the Dingies. He's still in the Dingies, but he's making music under the name Dread Pirate Roberts as well. Go check out his music. A lot of it's free out on Bandcamp. Thanks for listening. Let us know what you think. You can find us on Twitter at the handle SurvivedYG. You can email us at isurvivedyouthgroup@gmail.com. And please subscribe so that when we're putting these out regularly, you can come check them out. You'll be notified, and we'd love to have you listen and join in. Thanks again for listening, and we hope to talk to you soon.